plate armour, that shining thing that the knights of old wore as they charged off to do their heroic deeds. Now, if you're anything like me and a massive history nerd, you will have wanted a set of armour like this for a very long time, and as a child you will have made some armour out of cardboard and covered it in kitchen foil to try and replicate it, but it's never as good as the real thing. So what I'm going to try and do now is build myself a full set out of some sheet steel that I have managed to buy online. Now the first question you have to ask when designing armour is, what period of armour do you want to make? I've chosen, mainly because it's the easiest to make and I think I'd be able to actually do it, to do early medieval armour, the sort of link between the Roman Laurentia segmentata, I apologise if I pronounced it wrong, my Latin's not very good, and the late medieval Gothic. Gothic armour is extremely well made and extremely well fitting, and it took armourers in medieval times years to learn their craft, and they would often work on only one specific type of armour. So I'm pretty sure it would be too hard, especially for the first time I've tried to make armour. So, I have here a sheet of steel. This is going to form the back plate actually, but if you're wanting to make one solid cuirass, you just need two of these. One of course for the front, one of course for the back. For my armour, the front plate is going to be slightly different. Whilst the back plate is going to be a single piece, the front plate will be consisting of 4 parts. One going about down to here, and then another 3 bands below it, because that will mean that I can move. If you look how I am currently, if I try and bend forward, it's not happening. So if I have armour that can interlock and move past each other, that means I'll be much more mobile. Of course your back doesn't bend that much, so the back plate doesn't need that, so it can be made of one piece. But without further ado, grab a hammer and let's get started. So, I have all my pieces cut out. First is the top of the front plate, which you see matches the top of the back plate, because these two pieces will go over my shoulders and join. This hole, of course, is for my neck. Onto the bottom of this, so you have a curve to save weight here, that matches the curve of this piece. These two overlap. Then onto the bottom of that, slightly larger plate, but the same general dimensions. And then onto the bottom of that, one last big piece. Note how the pieces get progressively wider. This is because, of course, the inner one will curve more, and as you go further out, these need to lay over the top, so the curve will be slightly more shallow, and of course will need slightly more length to meet at the same point at the end. Here I have the top front piece of the cuirass, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to roll the edges. So I'm going to get all of the edges except the bottom one, because of course the bottom one will be covered by the next plate, so it doesn't matter about that edge. The rest of the edges, and of course the sides, because that's where it'll attach to the rest of the armour, so they don't really need to be rolled particularly. I'm going to hammer thin these 3 sides though, because that way, if I spread it out and make it thinner, because it's a 2mm steel plate for the front, I've got 1.5mm for the back, but 2mm for the front for extra protection and extra looking cool and other such. But I don't want to make this smaller by rolling the edges, and 2mm is quite hard to roll. So the first thing I'll do is I'll lay it on the vise, I'll get my hammer, and I'm going to hammer this edge out so it's thinner and wider. That means I can roll back, I won't lose any of my size, and the rolling itself will be easier. So, okay, so here's the armour after I've hammered down the edge. So as you can see, the 2mm of steel goes down to a much finer point at the end, and you can see the many hammer marks as it goes around the outside of the piece. So now what I'm going to do is this edge here is going to be bent downwards, and it'll be folded back underneath itself onto that side. I'll keep the camera rolling whilst I do this so that you can see basically how it's done, but I'll have a more in-depth explanation of how to roll things on a slightly more simple rolling job when I make the shoulder plates, which will be a later video. So now the rolling is finished. You can see on the edge that everything has been moved around and hammered back down on this edge. On this side it's all nice and smooth and looks pretty nice. And on the other side, turn it over, you can see where the end's been folded over back onto the original piece of metal. Now all you have to do is repeat that with all the other edges. 4 of the edges of this piece have now been rolled, as you can see. And the next step is to start vaguely bending it round so that it fits your chest. The way I'm going to do that is I've got an indent carved in this spare piece of board I have, and I've got a big hammer. So I'm going to place it vaguely over where I want to dish out, and hit it. This should, over time, vaguely bend it into the shape you want, so just keep hitting until you're happy with it. Now my arm has been dished out into a nice shape where it seems to fit. I've done almost all of it, but you'll notice that the edges aren't as curved as they need to be to fit around my body. So the next final step is to bend those corners. I'm going to do that using a vise. Now just believe me, underneath that sheet is a vise. I've put the sheet there so that when I hammer the edge of this armour, it's not making harsh dents and lines on the outside of the armour, and it's just bending it. This means that everything on the outside still looks very nice after I've finished. So I'm just going to lay it over the gap, get my hammer, and then gradually bend these ends round. So if you see, now it's curved around a lot more and it'll fit fully around my entire body. So I just do this with all the other of the corners, and the top piece will be pretty much finished. One thing that I have added to this is a area where it angles outwards up at the top of it, where it fits onto my chest here. So the reason why I've done this is mostly aesthetic, of course. It looks very cool, but also the reason why this was done on actual medieval armour is picture an incoming arrow. It hits your armour and it glances. If you don't have this bit here, what all the armour does is direct that arrow straight into your neck. Now, people in medieval times didn't like arrows going into their neck, so they made something that when it hit their armour and glanced, it would glance away and wouldn't hit them at the edge of their armour. So, I just thought I'd mention that. And of course the way I made it, pretty simple. Once you've done all the other shaping and everything else, you just get the edge, you'll lay it over the side, you'll hammer down like you did when you were rolling, and then you'll just keep hammering onto that until it's bent out at the desired angle. Once you're happy with how the front plate works, go ahead and make a matching back plate for it. This one, of course, I'm having it go all the way down. And then what you need to do is make sure that the two pieces match. So put them together. You'll need to bend one of them slightly less than the other one, so that one will fit over the top. I've chosen that the front will go over the back simply because the attacks are more likely to come on from the front, and the less chinks you have facing forward, the better it is for your armour. Now the top piece is finished. You must get the lower pieces if you're doing a segmented piece like me, and work out where each piece overlaps, and of course roll the top edge and make it bend to fit. This is done the same way over the vise that I did the top parts on the sides and the edges. And now all you need to do is get the two lower pieces that I'm doing and just bend these in the same way over each other, just making sure that they fit. After an afternoon of hammering, I finally have my completed front of the cuirass with its 4 progressively larger sheets. They don't fit perfectly, but they're as close as I can get. You've got a maximum of about, I'd say, 3mm between the plates at any point. So that's fairly good, and it's not the sort of thing that could be exploited in a fight. Because, of course, someone's not going to be able to come right up to you and try and stab downwards through your armour if you're there with a sword trying to stab them. You'll keep them at a range where their attacks would have to come from an angle that has no chance of glancing in through the armour. So the final thing left to do is to join all these pieces together. The way I'm going to do this is I'm going to have 3 strips of leather, one running down the middle, one running down the left edge, and one running down the right edge. I have a nice supply of leather I'm going to use for this, and it'll be riveted on with these very nice little copper rivets I have. Also, as it's a very large weight that this is supporting, I have vaguely made my own copper washers out of some sheet copper I had lying around. That's mostly just because the lower 3 parts are still very heavy, and you want to make sure that the rivets have a good grip and it's not going to tear. You want to spread the weight evenly over the leather as much as you can. After you've cut off any excess pieces, the final step in making the armour, disregarding any decoration that you want to add, is to add straps that allows you to attach it together, because of course you can't attach the front and back plates the same way we did the lower plates, because you'd never get it on and off. So I've got these little straps I've made from leather. They're very simple little things. The long ones are going to go on the front plate, and these will go on the back plate, and then you can hook round and strap the two together, and of course take it back off again when you want to. Because it's heavy armour, of course, I'm using some copper washers just to make sure it doesn't pull through and make sure it supports the weight properly. And the holes will be drilled on top of the shoulder pieces. see I've got a padded jacket or gambeson underneath. This is of course because whilst this will protect me from piercing and cutting, it won't actually protect me much from the blunt force of an impact. So you need something underneath to soak up. You could just use any thick clothing, but I like medieval authenticity, so I've made myself a gambeson. As you can see, I still have full movement. I can raise my arms, move them around. Admittedly, my arm doesn't go any further than this, but in a combat situation you don't need it to. And of course I need somebody to help me in and out of it, because some of these buckles are in a place that's hard for me to reach. But, as far as combat goes, I still have full access to move. Another myth that's said about armour is that when knights fell over they couldn't get up, and it was very easy to keep them down. This isn't true. Knights would often train a lot, and they could even get his horseback on in armour. And to dispel this, at least with this armour... Oh no, I've been hit by an arrow! And I have been felled. What shall I do? Oh, get back up and hit them with my sword. It's not difficult.